now I'm turning the question to Lisa Ludeman. She's the Senior Pharmaceutical Management Advisor of USAID. Lisa, at one of the information gathering meetings for this project, you explained about USAID involvement in regulatory system strengthening. From your perspective, how is the benchmarking assessment useful to USAID in general and to your work in particular?
Okay, hi everyone, good morning to those in the room and online, and thank you for the question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Great. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this, how the global benchmarking tool is useful to USAID in general and my work in particular. I will start by talking about the latter question, as I can speak to that most directly. So I sit in the Office of Health Systems at USAID, and regulatory system strengthening, as I mentioned in the previous consultation meeting, is very central to USAID's vision for health system strengthening, high-performing healthcare and universal health coverage, which recognizes, among many other aspects needed for those goals, that access to and appropriate use of quality assured, safe, and effective medical products is critical. In reading over the National Academy's report and the really nice overview that we heard this morning, the report does an excellent job of laying out the essential public health functions performed by medicine's regulatory authorities of the world, and also the immense challenges that they face individually within their own countries, as well as collectively as regional groups and continental groups, etc. The report eloquently describes the invisible nature of the regulatory system. I particularly picked up on that concept as one that we struggle with quite a bit as technical folks trying to move this work forward at the agency. The report noted that when regulatory systems work well, you hear nothing about them. And this invisibility creates many challenges and, quite frankly, blind spots in programming, including not least of which is getting sufficient attention for country and also donor investments. And we can see that in the relatively small investments that have been made in this area, even given USAID's history of working and strengthening regulatory systems together with other USG agencies such as the FTA. So in the past, when USAID worked with partner countries to assess and strengthen their regulatory systems, we collaborated as development partners as best as possible, but without a globally accepted process for doing so. We encourage country regulators not to wait for the next medicine quality or safety disaster to strike to generate political interest to reform the system, despite this being the way that many regulatory systems in high-income countries, including the U.S., were initially formed and later reformed. We supported regulators to conduct surveillance exercises to show to policymakers in the world the presence of drug quality and drug safety problems in their markets, and also help sound the alarm when in-country surveillance systems for tracking those problems receive no data at all. An indication of non-functional systems rather than the absence of quality and safety issues. And this is something that, I like to say is that, if you have a system that finds no problems whatsoever with the quality, safety, and also efficacy of products, then you have a really big problem. And, the notion of trees falling but not being detected, not because the trees aren't falling. And we also encourage countries to undertake regulatory reforms, not only to focus on the foundational elements such as laws, policies, and standard operating procedures, and not just new technologies. Someone was mentioning about new technologies earlier, and those are needed and important. But the report also does a very nice job of highlighting, that the foundational elements really need to be there for sustainable change and reform. However, given all of these efforts that I've just mentioned, we lacked a validated method for ranking and visualizing the limited functionality of regulatory system that we know to be the case in most USAID-supported countries. And as we all know, what can't be measured can't be communicated, but also what can't be communicated can't be funded. And that's something that, from my perspective, has been a challenge. Communicating the need and in concrete terms, the limited functionality to try to highlight and get funding to this important area where it's needed. And this, from my perspective, with my day job, is where the global benchmarking tool really comes in that process. As many of you know, USAID is a decentralized organization, and like many development partners, has the universe of public health issues to prioritize and address. So from my perspective, the value of the WHO global benchmarking tool process to my work directly and to USAID in general really can't be overstated enough. Although USAID has invested in strengthening regulatory systems in various capacities for decades, this is the first time that we have a globally accepted tool and process for in-country institutional development planning and support based on this assessment that we can really get behind, along with, and actually led by the country, but along with other development partners. And I want to emphasize the word process here, because for us, the power of the GBT, in as much that it's an assessment tool that produces globally accepted benchmarks, but also that it allows for country-led coordinated institutional development planning. So that process, although, definitely hear and take Annie's comments very well, and we were at the same meeting together in Rwanda, so that's sort of interesting to hear the next steps coming out of that. Although there are challenges to be sorted out in the way that institutional development plans are formed, we see that process of a forum for partners to get together and try to provide support in a coordinated manner to be extremely valuable. It allows us to sit down in a technical capacity and be led by the country to coordinate our efforts. And this, is something that's really valuable, even as a technical person coming from a donor agency. I can, sit down with my colleagues and describe this benchmarking process in fairly concrete terms. So having countries show in concrete terms their maturity on the scale of 1 to 4 across the 9 functions and clearly demonstrate deficiencies that threaten their ability to achieve, disease-specific health goals, but also cross-cutting health and development issues such as universal health coverage, AMR, even, the efficiency and effectiveness of supply chains. And then to back that up with institutional development plans, I really think it's a game changer. And to be able to say to my colleagues, let's say in a mission or in another, in Washington, that we spent X million dollars on these various disease and delivery programs, but this regulatory system is ranked at a 1 across the board. And that really means that it basically has no capacity to ensure the quality, safety, efficacy, and affordability in some cases of products. And that's a really powerful talking point. USAID has participated with the Global Benchmarking Tool Donor Coordination Group called the Coalition of Interested Partners at the global level, but most importantly, where the work is happening in country, beginning with Bangladesh, recently Rwanda, and hopefully many other countries to come. One suggestion I have is that it would be really helpful for, although this is sensitive data and we wouldn't be able to share that publicly, even among donor partners, to have some way of knowing not the results, but just the process that different countries are going through. So which countries are at what stage of doing the self-assessment or a validated assessment by WHO, or developing their institutional development plan, or redoing their assessment, as Anu was mentioning, because they've had improvements over the last period of time and they want to redo that assessment, would really help sort of the average technical person be able, at a donor organization like mine, be able to reach out to our colleagues and say, hey, this is happening and you should know about it and maybe even get involved. I was very happy to learn that dozens of countries have completed the GBT self-assessment, and so that's a talking point that we are taking far and wide in our agency. Just knowing where we are in the process will help development partners be informed and advocate for funding to support the needed reforms, and then, of course, work together collaboratively to support them. There's a lot more I could say about the findings and recommendations of the report. They really ring true with our experience working to strengthen regulatory systems and LMICs. But I'll stop there and keep to the question that was posed to me. We appreciate the FDA for commissioning this important work, and the National Academies Committee for bringing to light the many needs and opportunities. And just one note to express my agreement with the optimistic view of the report, if I could call it that, in terms of the tangible momentum forward in this area in recent years, and the important contribution of concepts such as universal health coverage for framing the conversation. I appreciate the comments from Lou Valdez this morning, encouraging us to identify practical next steps, which for us is greatly aided by the GBT process, and as well as better connecting regulatory systems to other perhaps more visible, if I could use that term, and certainly better funded public health and other development priorities. I could not agree more about the need to put a face to regulatory issues and develop policy briefs and talking points about the health and economic cases, particularly in context of UHC, out-of-pocket spending. There's many relevant talking points that could be developed and used even internally within agencies such as mine to make the funding case to invest in this area, which also likely transfers over to the regulatory authorities themselves in making their own policy and advocacy cases, including for funding. We're especially grateful to WHO for bringing its norm-setting global leadership and convening power to this critical and underemphasized public health issue, if I could describe it as such. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of the discussions today.
Thank you very much.